Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm honored to have back on the show once again one of our favorite and most requested guests, whistleblower and authority on all things Maximus Inc., loving father fighting the CPS family court system, independent researcher and journalist, podcaster, man of God, and one of my most dear and best friends, Jack Pendergrass. If you aren't familiar with Jack's research or testimony, it began when his rights and custody as a father were stripped away from him through the corrupt family court system. That was the biggest mistake the child-for-profit mafia that runs family court made, because it set Jack on a journey to understand how his innocence could have been so grossly ignored and how to fight for his daughter, who he hasn't seen in over a decade. And what the breadcrumbs of Jack's research led him to was a massive and nefarious company that largely puppeteers almost all government divisions and agencies in the US and abroad, and that has been mining our data and running the world's largest legal child trafficking ring in the US and abroad. This company is called Maximus Inc. Jack's research is extensive, spanning over a decade, and has brilliantly been able to piece together the history of child trafficking from biblical times leading up to the modern day child trafficking systems we see today in satanic cults, secret societies, and secret government sponsored child slave programs such as MK Ultra, and through legal entities such as the family court and CPS. His research goes above and beyond the realms of where he began, and he is one of the few researchers I put my stamp of approval on. In a world of weakened men who stay conveniently silent, Jack has risen up to become a protector of all women and children across the world and has been one of the biggest supporters and advocates of my own work and this podcast. He even chose this podcast to be the first podcast he ever did, which will be something I will always honor and cherish. And ever since, he's went on to do numerous other podcasts, and his research just keeps expanding. Jack's tireless efforts and research have made him one of the top experts in the world on Maximus Inc. And one of my favorite things about him is his desire to serve. He's not a survivor in the same way many are in this community, yet he is the first to stand up for any and all survivors, whistleblowers, and parents like him that are fighting corruption in order to get justice. It is work like Jack's that educate us on who is actually pulling the strings, getting us one step closer to full exposure of all that is hidden in the dark. If you missed any of Jack's other episodes on this podcast, where he shares his testimony, the 101 of Maximus Inc., or his incredible breakdown of corruption in the state of Tennessee, I'll have all his links in the playlist, all the links in the show notes, including his playlist, for you all to go check out. I definitely highly recommend listening to every podcast Jack does. On today's episode, we will be diving deeper into the rabbit hole of Maximus Inc., including recent discoveries Jack has made tying child support to MK Ultra, and much more. So you guys grab a pen and paper, because we are going to be learning a lot together today. Before I finish introducing today's guest, I wanted to give a quick reminder: if you're a survivor or whistleblower who wants to share your story on the podcast, or who wants to share any information privately with me, you can email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. I'd also love your support on my Substack, where I've been journaling as an outlet for me personally to reflect on the podcast guests and my advocacy work. And you can subscribe to me at www.emmacatherine.substack.com. All of my social media links are in the show notes, and I can't thank all of you for your courage to help shine a light on the darkness with me and each guest. So you guys, without further ado, Help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, voice for the voiceless, survivor, whistleblower, fierce warrior, researcher and educator, and someone with one of the biggest hearts I know, Jack Pendergrass. Jack, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, and always, always.
The pleasure is mine. Everybody loves whenever you come on, and this has been definitely, it's timely right now because you've made a lot of different discoveries recently. So I think it worked out that we didn't connect, a little bit earlier. But it's definitely been a long time coming for you to come on. You've had a lot of different things that you have ran into, discovered, people that you've met that have been really important to this research, and even people that we know that, have been able to provide puzzle pieces, which is really exciting. But one of the things that I wanted to commend you on is I love that your research is always expanding. A couple years ago, whenever I met you, you were at one place and speaking really loudly on it, on where you were with understanding Maximus, family court, CPS, foster care, these different systems. And then you started listening to other researchers that had nothing to do with Maximus. And all of a sudden, you started being able to piece these puzzle pieces together with other people's research outside the realms of family court and where you started. And your research has just gotten so expansive, and you've been able to really expand on your story and expand on this amazing research that you've discovered. And I know there's a lot of people that listen. I get asked sometimes in the comments, or I get people that reach out and they're like, "Hey, I really want to research this. Where would you recommend that I start?" And I think that that's something that once you sort of know how to do it and know the process of maybe where to start with research, or what rabbit hole to go down first, or how to connect a piece to another piece, of your story and other information that you heard that sounds like it could connect. And that can be really challenging for people, and they end up getting really lost in research, and a lot of people I think end up giving up because of it. Where you've sort of learned to organize and systematize it, I'd love to start with you maybe walking through your process of how do you start researching something, and what is your system in a sense of building on where you start and building a web outside of that.
Um, I would tell anybody like don't research like I do. Um, it, and I mean that is like for me it happens really organically. I'll start out with an idea. I'm like, okay, so, but I'll initially begin a search on the subject. Just keyword searches. Um, so for Maximus, just to give everybody an example, Maximus. So I started out with Maximus Inc. Literally just went to Google, and not to go off on a tangent, but I am tired of people saying, even amongst other researchers, like, don't use Google, blah blah blah. Well, you have to be able to discern what's true and what's not, right? Um, and you can easily prove or disprove information by just simply cross-referencing. It's not hard. Um, so that's usually the way I begin. It's just a simple keyword search, either Google, DuckDuckGo, or Yandex is really great too. Um, so then, when you get outside of the search engines, or you can start refining your searches and going to certain websites that a lot of researchers use. Now, since we're not in an academic setting, we don't have access to universities, databases and things like that, right? And we don't have access to the databases we all really want to get into, and which would be government databases that are hiding all the information that people we all really need to see. But um, that could involve a lot of bad stuff. Um, so what I mean to say is, like, everything that I've been able to find through connections, and I would say this goes for a lot of researchers. It's all open source information, and I try to share with everybody. Either through like Telegram or Twitter. share what with Dana, Dana, Tony, Pamela, and yourself, and a few of our core group, right? I share websites that are just invaluable to me as a researcher because um, they aggregate the information that we're looking for, and then from there you can go even further in your research. Um, and I think it's essential for others, and including myself in this, that we have other people that we can reach out to who are other researchers. But I think everybody should be a researcher to some degree because we're all searching for the truth about these systems that exist, and it's easily to get dissuaded when you don't know where to look or who to look to help with information. Um, so generally speaking, yeah, that's how I began researching any particular subject. Now I've been doing this a long time. I've been researching Maximus. As you mentioned earlier, over a decade now. But I've been researching over 2 decades. I don't speak about it a whole lot, but I worked in the chemical industry for about 10 years, right? So I worked for DuPont, and none of this I'm proud of. I worked for DuPont, I worked for Big Pharma, and when I say Big Pharma, I worked for Sanofi, which is based in France. I worked for Sun Pharmaceuticals, which is based in Mumbai, India. Not that I lived in Mumbai or France by that that statement, but um, these massive pharma companies, had subsidiaries and branch offices and facilities, just all over the world. So me being near Chattanooga, that's where I worked. And you would be surprised, but yeah, DuPont and Big Pharma are a huge part of the child trafficking industry. So, I guess I mean to say is that through all my employment history, through all the work I've done, family courts, even where we're at now with the research, um, I've started to see a nexus point or nexus points, I guess you would say, and seeing how all this relates. And it really all does. It's just, it takes a long time to be able to read and analyze and disseminate the information into a usable form for people. Um, Believe me, like when we speak of Maximus, nobody really realizes the scope or history of this company. And the same thing for some of these other pharmaceutical companies. We're all familiar with DuPont. Um, they go back hundreds of years, of course. We know they're one of the Illuminati family bloodlines, not the Saturnalians, the Canaanite families, the Venetians. Um, so we know how some of these families operate, and we know some of the connections. But yeah, it's taken me a long time to be able to articulate all this information for people. Now, I need to really focus on some solid threads for people, like especially on Twitter, as far as like um, the chemical company um, ties to child trafficking, the pharmaceutical companies ties to child trafficking. We know what Maximus is about for the most part, for most people who follow us, and we know where they exist, and the things they do are just you know they're atrocious at best. They're atrocious. But yeah, just um, I think people should think about like what they're doing. Like what kind of career you're in. This is something that will help. Look at the industry you're in, how it came about. That will lead you to a lot, actually. For example, like if you're in banking or you're a CPA, those the banking system, the modern banking system as we know it, came from Italy, right? Came from Venice, the Venetians, the Venetian black nobility, which can be traced back to Canaan. Um, so it's like I said, it takes a long time to be able to articulate that something like that into a simple statement, you know. But yeah, just some helpful pointers, you know. And I'm always dropping links on Twitter, Twitter and Telegram, and those are sites I use frequently. You have to look outside of that, but those are generally a good starting place, you know. If you're serious about research, um, and learning about what's happening, who's involved, how. Um, I think it's critical that you know pay attention to other researchers. Doing what we do, um, it's so easy to get tunnel vision. Um, so I'm thankful for the other researchers out there, the other people who are fighting these systems. Because I heard it best described when I was young. It's like everybody you meet knows something you don't. So you know, really take uh, it, appreciate that information. Because a lot of the things I've found have been little snippets of information in just casual conversation with people. I'm like, oh wow, okay. So I hope that helps everybody a little bit. And so that's generally how I begin I've got a project in mind what I want to research. That's kind of how I begin.
Let me ask you this, because I think this is another thing for people that have started researching and maybe do have a path and are on it. How do you vet the researchers that you align with? Do you have certain things that you look for? Do you research the person? What is your process for saying this is somebody that I can trust and this is somebody that I can't?
Generally speaking, I'll comment on their posts. And if I get pushback, um, or they get defensive about somebody questioning the research, that's usually a red flag. But if they're willing to openly discuss, you asking genuine questions and not for any other reason, but to ask questions to to learn from them, and I think at times I can probably no, I can say I'm guilty of that, particularly about Maximus. But I would say to that, I'm probably one of 8 to 10 people I really that have researched Maximus seriously. Um, but I always provide receipts, when I post something, I'm like, this is, you know, and for anybody who's watching us, anybody who will watch us, who knows us, I really try not to go off half cocked, I want you to trust me enough in my research enough to know that you can come to whatever platform I'm using and use that information even in a court case. Like I want it to be vetted that hard. I want it to be able to be used as testimony if need be. Um, but I would also say to that, don't just blindly, and this is for any researcher, don't just blindly believe whatever they're posting. If you see something that you maybe have a question about, look it up. Um, but generally speaking, like most of the researchers I've been able to become friends with and become close with, um, they want to teach people what they're researching and they want to have an open dialogue. Um, and you genuinely usually don't get much kickback from them. You don't get much resistance. I think to some degree we all enjoy teaching people, not for our own edification, but we want to help people and be empowered through the information. Um, you know, Dana has become a really close friend to me. Her research is just superb, and she touches on a lot of areas that I wasn't aware of. A lot of these groups that I wasn't aware of, and she's been nothing but kind and explains things to me. I'm like, okay, well, how does this connect to this? And she breaks it down, and so I'm thankful for Dana and her work, because just the other day she posted something and I was like, oh wow, like I think and I messaged her. I was like, hey, I think we just may have found a connection to not just Maximus, but the founder of Maximus, his father. I'm like, all these people run in the same circle, in some form or fashion they do. And she was like, oh, and like we kind of had a eureka moment, like making all these connections that we didn't see previously, So it's generally speaking, it's easy to vet people, and it seems to be, even amongst like your academic researchers or professional, quote unquote, professional researchers, everybody vets each other and they all check each other and cross-reference their information. And that's to me, that's why it's important to cite your information, because then it leaves a trail of breadcrumbs, or a direct link to whatever you're researching. People can go there, and then they can look at your work and say, well, this person cites it. And I think that's, to me that's incredibly important. Um, and a friend of mine, Blue Canaries, she's on Twitter also. She does the same thing, and I think it's also important to shout out the people that help you. You establish trust. You want people to help you and trust you in a likewise manner. You want to reciprocate that. I don't think it could work well any other way.
And you're so good at that. You're always giving people credit, and it's sad some people don't do that with you. But like you said, there's not many people that are doing this research. So if somebody were to post something and not give you credit, there's not a lot of people that, if somebody wanted to learn more and they go type it in Google, whatever the person said, chances are that your name's going to come up somewhere and people will find you anyways, so anybody that's shouting out work, work of somebody else, give that person credit. Like Jack said, it's not just helpful for them, but it's helpful for you, because then you're citing a trusted person and backing what you're saying up with another source. A lot of people like to see, like Jack said, sort of a trail of breadcrumbs, or see an alliance that's formed around this opinion or fact, and see all the different, that it's not just you saying something, that there's other people out there saying it, and it's validating to whatever you post, to post a creator who's, discovering this stuff. And you're really good, Jack, at doing that and at shouting people out and encouraging people. Like I said in the intro, you're always the first to step up anytime somebody needs help or encouragement. And you're always right there, the first one cheering people on, encouraging people, shouting them out, and supporting them. So you've been, you're a warrior in this community, and everybody knows that about you, and like I said, I put my stamp of approval on you 100 million%. And I know anybody that listens to you does. And that's also why it's important that you're doing podcasts and stuff, because then we can call out the people who aren't giving you credit and saying, no, like Jack just said that on a podcast, like that's Jack's information. So we can start to discern too whenever we're studying different people. But that can be tough sometimes, just being able to vet people. And I also think there's a lot that can be found with, if you find a good researcher like Jack, you guys, look at who he closely associates with. Like that's another good way to expand what you're doing, because if you find one researcher you really trust, instead of trying to look for other ones on your own, maybe go see if that researcher is involved in some type of a small community of people that they support and that support them. And that can lead you to researchers potentially that are researching the topic that you're looking for, or research a topic that you didn't know that you wanted to research, or something that ends up connecting to your story. So that's always a way too that for me, I vet, like I go see who that person's aligned with. I'm like, oh, well, they have to have some good friends. Like if they're a good person doing good research, who are they collaborating with and supporting, who's in their circle? And it's a good way to get a lot done fast in a sense. And your research is just so expansive, Jack. I'm excited to get into some of this stuff today. Um, I want to turn it over to you. I'll follow your lead on this, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to choose maybe a starting point in the conversation. Um, but for people who don't know Maximus, I will link our first episode. I'll link all of them. I'll link Jack's playlist, but especially go back and listen to Jack's testimony. We dive really deep into just the 101, of what Maximus is and talking about it. The second episode also, we dive a little bit deeper into it. So you don't have to go watch those to listen to this, but if this is a topic you're interested in, or it's something that you're going through and want to learn more about, you can learn a ton in the hours of podcasting that Jack and I have done together. So go check those episodes out too. So Jack, I'll hand it over to you.
Oh gosh, yeah. There's been so many developments here recently, Um, and I think a hot topic, and God, I hate to use that term, hot topic. Anyway, so the border crisis, right? So all the, all the illegal aliens, and I'm not one to be PC, so I'm going to call it like it is. Um, and I have no issues with anybody coming to the United States, but I would say that we should be taking care of our people first. That's just my opinion and how I feel about it, right? Um, but you have NGOs, and I will argue with anybody till I'm blue in the face about this, but we don't have a government. We've got a corporation that's contracting with other corporations, and I think um, the purpose of that is so that there is a complete dissolution of any form of government. Where it's all statutes, um, rules, policies, and nothing really in accordance with any kind of constitutional law, constitutionally based law, right? I think that's the purpose, is just for these NGOs like Maximus, Palantir, Deloitte, um, some of the military industrial complex companies. They want to create a environment where it's people are easily controlled, and they can do that through privatization. Um, so the border, right? And this was just a couple of weeks ago. Um, I knew that Maximus had been providing resettlement services for immigrants, for a very long time, going back. I've got a document from like 2006 where they were providing resettlement services for immigrants then. Um, and I know that through the other research, I mean, that was just not, that's not the first time. It's just probably one of the earlier documents that I personally have to identify, resettlement services. And I started seeing just over the past few weeks, past few months, the Medicare and Medicaid rolls, people being kicked off Medicaid and Medicare. Um, and my friend Stacy can completely confirm this for me. Like we've got a lot of information we haven't even released yet that they don't want us to release. I'll say that. They're using advanced AI to conduct Medicaid and Medicare assessments. Same thing for the Veterans Enrollment Service, which Maximus bought, the company that was conducting those assessments for the VA. Then it occurred to me, I'm like, they're replacing Americans with illegal immigrants. That was a huge purpose in doing that. Um, they're offering people not just relocation assistance, but they're offering them basically a universal income. You know, people are getting cards with a prepaid or preset spending limit on it, like something like around $5,000 for individuals, like, and it goes up there for more for families. So then they're also taking and using those Social Security benefits that the people have been booted out of Medicaid and Medicare and the Veterans Administration. They're using those Social Security benefits for the illegal immigrants that are coming across the border. Maximus is a huge facilitator of all of this. And if you go back and look at some of the tweets I've posted, you know, and I know it exists before what I've been posting. You know, I'm just slowly piecing it together, and not many people have identified it. So we know that when COVID came around, right, that and Maximus has been providing services for the CDC since 2012. They've been running the CDC info system, the complete system. So then when, in my estimation, you know, in the documents I've got, other people's research confirm, you know, that this stuff was developed by DARPA. You'll hear really nobody in Senate or Congress even remotely touch on DARPA's involvement in this. And if you know anything about DARPA, DARPA is the think tank of the military-industrial complex. Outside of any other agency or company, DARPA is DARPA's top, right? They have less than 220 employees and black budgets like you would imagine. You know, some of the other budgets that we see are fudged. So you have 220 people of the highest intelligence running experiments, doing God knows what in secrecy. And yeah, DARPA and Maximus are related. And I found those connections during Vietnam. Maximus.
Really quick, Jack. What year was Maximus conceived?
I would say the conception of the company itself had been there since well before it was actually founded. Because of who the founder is and his connections to the military-industrial complex. You know, we're talking about a second-generation West Point graduate who went to Stanford and George Mason University. Those are CIA fronts. We know that. Even more so than that, his father, there again, you know, his father was first generation, or, you know, he was West Point graduate. His father was involved in the Eisenhower administration through the Atoms for Peace program, which was he basically spearheaded the food irradiation program. Now, if you know anything about the MK Ultra experiments, you know that they were giving people various injections. They were giving children food that was that had radioactive isotopes in it. And I've heard some people speak about that, and they're like, well, you know, technically that kind of led to the creation of nuclear medicine, which has had some benefits. I'm like, yeah, but at what cost? At what cost? These people, 829 women at Vanderbilt were given injections of radioactive isotopes, not knowing what was in it, not knowing what they were receiving, not knowing what the side effects were or were going to be. I don't mean to go off on a tangent there, but So the systems developed, by DARPA, the bioweapons. Maximus has been right there paralleling all these companies to facilitate legislation, to lobby to their benefit, everybody's benefit. And some of the more recent findings have indicated that yes, the child support system is directly related to MK Ultra. I firmly believe, and I've asked some other researchers like Dana, and I've talked to Stacy and a few other people. And they're not going to come right out and say it, but I think it's pretty conclusive that child support is an extension of MK Ultra, and we know that through the MK Ultra program, they frequently change the names of the sub projects and just pass them on. So I think that's what's happened. When Maximus was founded, they were in the 70s. The amount of assessments conducted for before it was Health and Human Services, it was HEW, Health, Education, and Welfare. So then in 1979, which is just 4 years after Maximus was founded, HEW was broken down individually into different departments. It became the Department of Education, the Department of Health and Human Services, and then welfare was included. And with an educated guess, it was because of the church committee and the church committee identifying that the MK Ultra experiments were actually happening and had happened and were happening and still are. But Maximus has always been there, if not through the founder directly, then his dad, which leads us to all the technology and all the tracking systems being used in child support family court systems, which leads us back to the border because they were using WhatsApp. And if you know anything about WhatsApp, WhatsApp's tied to the NSO group in Israel, which they were able to embed the Pegasus spyware system. So that was Maximus in a partnership with the CDC. Maximus created the federal centralized vaccine database that was separate from theirs. So people are, I've seen a lot of people, not only in the government, and just in general in the public, but they're like, the CDC hiding the information. I'm like, no, it's not the CDC hiding the information. Maximus is controlling that information. They run their databases, period. So they're creating just a way for everybody to avoid liability, and nobody has accountability by doing that. Same way as the border. It's it's like that meme of Spider-Man, or everybody's pointing to everybody else. Yeah, exactly. So that's what's happening, man. And it's terrible, at best. But yeah, so the border crisis has been exacerbated by Maximus, specifically Maximus. I mean, you've got some other contractors in there like General Dynamics, and then the quote unquote government agencies like HHS, and then the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and myself and Tony and Pam, a few others have been working with Aaron, Aaron who worked for HHS. And was a whistleblower, and then Terry Lee Rose. We've been working with them, we've all been passing information back and forth to each other, trying to show these systems, and I've learned a lot from them too, probably more from them than they have from me, but we're all fighting, because what's going to happen is all these children that have been trafficked through the border are eventually going to wind up in the welfare system and CPS system in the United States, which is going to exacerbate and overwhelm a already overwhelmed system, right? So you're taking a system that's already terrible, and then you're adding an exponent on it, For those of you who don't know, CPS was privatized by Maximus. That's who privatized social services, was Maximus. I've got the documentation. I can show you the freaking act. But yeah, it's some of these revelations I've come across just here, like I said, in just probably 2 or 3 months. I'm just like, there are other government contractors. There are military industrial complex contractors. Maximus seems to be consolidating power and recruiting from these MIC companies, big data, big tech, big pharma. They just recently hired an attorney who worked for the CIA. So then you have IBM. IBM is basically the original progenitor of biosurveillance, bioinformatics, data collections. They did that, during World War II. But that was preceded by, the holographic machines that were, coming online, like during World War One, the 1892 census in the United States. So we're at a place where they had the information, they were just waiting on the technology to catch up. And we've arrived there to a scary point. I know that's all that may seem a little bit nebulous, but it's all related. And, some of the threads I have on Twitter kind of articulate that a bit better in a very straightforward manner, because for me, like, I know this stuff so well. I kind of see it, I don't need to read it so much anymore. I mean, I still read, of course, but kind of looking at it like a mind map, so I'm trying to help people and show them, all these little connections, because they matter. So, but then just literally, like, probably 2 or 3 days ago, Dana posted a picture from one of her areas of research, which was the Process Church of the Final Judgment. Um, and it was I think like a newspaper clipping, newspaper article, or a flyer or something. She could tell you better than I could where she got it from, but the Fernald School was mentioned. Fernald was one of the places where Quaker Oats and MIT were feeding young boys, and quote unquote after school, or rather a science class. And these were awards of the state, right? These boys were awards of the state. So those laws allowed, and still allow, testing on orphans or children in the welfare system that are wards of the state. And that really sparked some other avenues of research for me. I'm like, okay, I know that the founder of Maximus, his dad was involved in the food irradiation program. So that led me to Fernald. Back and forth, there are just so many parallels between all of this stuff, and it's taken me this long to find it all. It's really amazing. So it's good to have other people who are researching too, because you might see something in just one other post that will make connections that you've been looking for. It's like the article I sent you in, the link about Russell Long.
Do you want me to bring that up? Do you want to talk about that right now or not yet?
Yeah, I think it'd be a great time to.
Okay.
All right, folks. So if you don't know anything about Dutroux, it's horrifying. And that was in Belgium, is where the Dutroux murders occurred. Okay, so if you read the contents, if you read the entirety of the screen, this particular article on this link, it really doesn't get into that, but the Dutroux murders involved the elite of European royalty, child trafficking, and just the worst things that you can imagine occurred. I had originally found this page, this site, and had lost it. Like a dummy, I didn't have. I take a lot of screenshots and I do a lot of bookmarks and things like that. I didn't have my screen lock on my phone, and deleted the link. So I looked forever and a day to find this. I even messaged you, Em, about trying to find this link. And if you scroll down, Em, I'll show people why this is so important.
And feel free to, if there's anything that you want to read or anything like that, feel free to for people watching or just listening. And you can tell me where to stop.
If you'll scroll down a little bit more, I think we're okay. So this is one of the women who testified in the MK Ultra experiments, and you really need to see these ladies' testimony. And there were several of them that testified during. I think this was during the church committee hearings. That I'm not sure of. Gosh, I want to say they did, but I've watched their testimony and it is heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. These ladies just were brave enough to speak out about the atrocities, about the horrors they endured through all these tests, conducted under MK, and Sidney Gottlieb and some of the other scientists, and I use that term loosely. But anyway, I found this link months and months ago, and what's interesting, she was basically used to blackmail politicians through her conditioning through the MK program. They turned her into basically a sex slave that she could be recorded having sex with these politicians, who could be later blackmailed, right? But if you'll scroll down just a little bit in where it talks about Russell Long, yeah, if you want to read that, then I can explain why this is pertinent.
Sure. Senator Russell B. Long, born in 1918, Democrat, served to Lieutenant U.S. Navy 1942 through 1945, participated in invasions of Sicily, Anzio, southern France, Sole practice, Baton Rouge, 1946 to 1947. Associate, Long and West, from 1946 to 1948. Executive Council, State of Louisiana, 1948. Elected Senator, U.S. Senate, 1948 to 1987. Assistant Majority Leader, 1965 to 1968. February 22nd, 1967. Des Moines Register. Kennedy probe hailed by Lane. Senator Russell B. Long said Tuesday he has convinced District Attorney Jim Garrison of New Orleans has some information the Warren Commission didn't have about a possible conspiracy to assassinate President John F. Kennedy. Long, the assistant Democrat leader of the Senate, told an informal news conference he had discussed the possibility of a conspiracy with Garrison at length on a plane trip last October. He asked me not to tell the FBI what he was doing, and I didn't, Long said. February 24th, 1967, Lowell Sun. Only District Attorney Garrison holds key to JFK assassination plot. Later, he, Garrison, talked it over with the U.S. Senator Russell B. Long, the Senate Democrat whip. Long told him he had his own doubts about the Warren report, notably the sequence of firing of the shots that killed Kennedy November 22nd, 1963 in Dallas.
Okay, now, the young lady, well, at the time, the young lady who gave MK Ultra testimony, and it's there on the page. Gosh, I don't know if I can. Oh, there we go.
And I didn't read the top part too. I can read that. This is said by, this is a quote from somebody that said, there was a senator from Louisiana that I was with a couple of times. They had to do that, in quotes, shock treatments, unquote, because I couldn't go home remembering that I had just been with Senator Long or somebody like that. He was kind of old, but apparently he was on one of the committees that was checking up on the CIA. They were always being checked on. That's what they told me.
Okay, so what you have, and I learned about Russell Long through the initial research I've been doing on child support. Russell Long from Louisiana, his father was also a senator, both high level Freemasons. I can't remember what their lodge was, and I'm not sure if it's, and Lexi brought this up. I can't, I'll have to look at their lodges again. I don't know if it was Scottish Rite or, one of the other groups of Freemasonry. But they were both Freemasons. But Russell Long was the primary author of Title 4D funding, which is child support. Combine that with what you just read, and then there is another excerpt in that page. Not only was he involved with, obviously, MK Ultra and the CIA, he was also involved with the creation of Title 40 funding, which is child support. So you combine the two, and I think the testimony from Mullen was that anytime they were looking for additional funding for a program, and she was referring to the MK Ultra program, he was the one basically trying to find funding for additional MK programs. So 2 plus 2, you have the man who's a chief architect for child support, which people are told that child support is welfare recovery, but with what we just read, and there's some other pertinent information on this site, child support to me is just an extension of the MK program, but through the family court system, which would make sense when you see that the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare was essentially dissolved and became HHS, right? All this came about during the church committee hearings. So it's like, okay, they got in trouble or got more or less like a slap on the wrist. So then everybody started scrambling, and they were like, "Well, how do we make this go away in the public eye?" Well, let's work on child support, get some additional funding in here for additional NK programs. We'll change the name of them. We'll have all these assessments, and we'll pay Maximus a bunch of money to do all these assessments and help us reestablish programs. That's, with an educated guess, that's what Title 4E, which is um, Title 4E, which is foster care funding, Title 4D, which is child support, Maximus, all appeared in the same year.
Oh, wow.
So you have David Mastron, who was in intelligence and involved in some black ops while he was in the military. Um, None of this stuff to me is coincidental. Um, Let me see here, and I've got a document I printed out, and I'll just give everybody just a little overview here.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So this is what, I didn't realize this until I found the document. Mastering was involved in a program in Vietnam called Igloo White. That was the first utilization of high technology on a battlefield. He was the data analyst, one of the preeminent data analysts for that program. So you had the Jason Group. I just found a book on them like maybe a week ago. I couldn't find any information on them previously, but Jason Group, um, their parent company was the MITRE Corporation. So you had Jason, and this is pre-DARPA when it was just ARPA. Um, they were basically creating a digital battlefield in the 60s during Vietnam. They had advanced sensors, and some of those sensors are so advanced then that the technology is still being used. It's just gotten smaller. So for all these sensor technologies that you see now, this was the program that provided the basis for everything since. So David Mastron was providing data analysis. Not only was he was providing data analysis, he was creating interdiction scenarios. Let me just read this. Since I was a person responsible for simulating the air war operations on a computer in Vietnam, and since there weren't computers in Korea or World War II, I must have been the first person to program a computer to simulate combat operations while actually serving in a war zone. I was part of a special team assembled by the Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force in 1968 to evaluate McNamara's Wall, a series of seismic and acoustic sensors airdropped over the Ho Chi Minh Trail. My job was to create a computer simulation of truck convoys moving down the Ho Chi Minh Trail and air orders of battle bombing these convoys. Okay. If anybody's ever read a manual for child support or things like that, you'll notice that it's a very weird language they use. Those are called SOPs for all intents and purposes. What a SOP is a standard order of procedure. Those child support manuals, a lot of the foster care manuals, they read like a military briefing paper. Like they're explaining to you how to do this, but it's a very confusing language. But people who have been in the military, who run operations. They understand the language, and that's that David Masters is one of the most evil men I've ever read about, but you wouldn't know it. It's like we've talked about before him. They have this facade that they're a humanitarian, that are doing all this great work. It's social, you know, improving social welfare, social justice, this, that, and the other. But underneath all that, they're doing everything to undermine those. They're using poor and disadvantaged people to run these freaking um, science experiments. So how does this relate to what I just read about Master? Okay, all this happened really fast. So it's from like the mid '60s to the mid '70s. You had the exposure of the MK Ultra program. You had all these um, welfare programs come about, foster care, child support, blah 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 blah. So when David Mastering became involved with child support, these models that he was using, these computer simulations, he applied to child support and welfare. He turned people into targets, started creating socioeconomic profiles. Maximus created the databases for child support and foster care. So when we talk about pedophiles and what kind of networks and things like that they have access to, they're using systems like he created. And inevitably, when you talk about the military industrial complex, you study the Federal Reserve System, you know that came from the globalist bankers, which are controlled by the Vatican and the Jesuits. It gets real deep real fast. So, um, and these have just been some of my more, recent revelations. And Dana and I have been sharing information for a little while, going back and forth, talking about people and events. I mean, it's so much more involved than I had ever imagined. I started with child support, and here I am talking about the Canaanites and the Jesuits and the Vatican. So if you're serious about research, people, get ready. It's you kind of start assembling like a true history of the world almost. It's like here's the presented history, what we're given to in school. Study this, that, and you start studying this stuff, and you're like, my God, this is social engineering on a global scale and through the ages. That's what this has all been about, and it's to make us complicit, to take away any free will, any God-given free will. They want us subjects of the Antichrist system, of that globalization that they've been pushing for 30 or more years now. Yeah, child support is part of the one world order. Make no mistake. Maximus is part of the one world order. I found out, I think last week or the week before, that Maximus had been contracting with the World Bank and IMF to run programs through USAID here, in Central America. It's just a never-ending rabbit hole of Maximus, but ultimately, they're facilitating and encouraging lobbying for a dissolution of government, so that any any semblance of the quote unquote United States of America that we see is just one big corporation. And they really have, I mean, they're so deeply embedded into the quote unquote government, it's ridiculous. Like, I'm finding stuff daily about Maximus. There again, it's a thing of I know there are other companies involved, but no other company receives as many contracts as Maximus. Um, I was talking to Terry Lee Rodas, we were discussing General Dynamics. You know, they had a contract um, for a lot of the stuff that's happening at the border, but then, you know, Maximus bought General Dynamics call center contract, you know. Um, so it's, you know, I'm hoping to help everybody become aware of these things, you know. I've been hyper focused on Maximus for a long time, but thank God other people are there to help pull me out of that tunnel, you know, and like, hey, look over here too. And I'm like, yeah, you know, it's been so helpful for me. Basically, folks, like, yeah, I'm not sure where to go. I'm still studying Maximus, but you know, studying some of these other programs that have been there that we just weren't aware of, like um, this Operation Maximus, or David Master, founder of Max, was involved in Vietnam, wasn't declassified until 2006. So then I started looking at some of the other, you know, some of the other radiation experiments on people. This stuff happened in the 40s and 50s, and they weren't declassified until 95, 96. Um, just so everybody knows, I'm in Tennessee. You know, I'm about 2 hours south of Oak Ridge National Lab and about 20 minutes north of Chattanooga. The first recorded radioactive isotope injection occurred at Oak Ridge National Lab. Gentleman by the name of Eb Cade had a car accident, and he should have walked away with just a broke leg, but they injected him with, I think, plutonium or uranium, and that was kind of the start for a lot of the MK stuff. They started with radiation, and then moved into LSD, and then you'll hear people talk about targeted individuals, you know, energy directed weapons. All that is derived from the Manhattan Project, which is what facilitated Operation Paperclip, which was what spawned all the MK programs. And that is why Tennessee is so critical to all of this. And trying to show people that Tennessee is also essential to the foster care programs, child support, welfare, the entire Appalachian range, you know, for disadvantaged kids, adults. They've all been used as test subjects. You know, it's not isolated to the Appalachians, you understand, but those are the human lives and souls these people have destroyed, are just, you know, the people who have been kept intentionally poor. I'll say that they have to maintain a percentage of the population they, as test subjects, you know. And when the kids, and even when the adults become wards of the state, they then have the quote unquote legal authority to experiment on them. I think Maximus has been just a massive facilitator of that through the court system, then, you know, through child support, foster care. So that's kind of where I'm at now. You know, I'm going back and just rereading some of these old documents I've got, and some other stuff I've been able to find. So I'm just kind of seeing where this leads me, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting just how all these puzzle pieces fit together. Like how you said, you could start somewhere and then something else comes in and it's like, oh, that has to do with what I'm researching. I'm going to add that into my research, and then something else, but that is something that I think is also important, is measuring timelines between things. people, events,
Yes,
and
yes.
seeing if there's synchronicities, right? And like that's something that you've been able to do really well is look at that and not just look at like the present moment or even like what's going to happen in the future, but you're going back in time even and studying these things. Maximus, where did it start? When was its conception? What else was happening in history at that time? Who else was, involved? What was the owner involved in at that time and before he got into that company, right? And you start to go down these rabbit holes and it gets, like you said, it gets pretty deep pretty quick, and even discovering that um the owner of Maximus back then, Mastron, that he was a Freemason too, which isn't right. Wasn't he a Freemason? Wasn't that his LinkedIn that we were looking at that one time?
We were looking at, that's
Or,
the current CEO, I think we were
oh,
looking at, and
even better.
Caswell.
Okay.
Yeah, Caswell. Yeah, like Caswell is the current CEO. He's a Freemason. Um, and I mean, it's the founder Mastron. If you don't know anything about Stanford or Stanford Research Institute or any of those associated higher learning institutions, those are all CIA. That's where these agencies recruit from, or they get the recruits when they're young and really gullible. I mean, highly intelligent but gullible. Um, so yeah, without any doubt in him, the founder and I would say his dad, they were all, either Freemasons or associated with Freemasonry and maybe some of the other outlying groups. You don't go to West Point and not pretty much be selected to go, you know, and it's usually by somebody pretty deep in the military industrial complex that says, hey, we want this person or we want that person. And the Mastrons, the father and the son being David, founder, like they're just involved in all kinds of bad stuff. I mean, just evil, evil. Normal people don't think like this. We've said that multiple times. These are demons. They're not. They have this shell of humanity about them, but that's as far as it goes in my estimation.
And we know too, Stanford, I had that validated by three survivors on this podcast who came forward and said, I was used in MK Ultra experiments at Stanford. So we also know that after Project Paperclip, there was Nazi scientists and doctors that were brought to Stanford to initiate these programs coming to America. So there's also
Right.
like other timelines too that you can mix in of, Mastron is attending the same university that experiments were happening on children, and that MK Ultra was further developed through this university and others, obviously. But the breadcrumbs, they don't lie whenever you look at them that way.
Yeah, and that's I watch your program, of course, and it helps, like seeing these others, seeing your guests, your survivors, people we know that have become friends of ours, like validate, like everybody's validating each other, and we're seeing that those connections come from different people, and that's incredibly helpful to me. I think for validation, it's like because you've got a group of people who otherwise might not have known about each other, and yet their stories are corroborating. I'm like, that's awesome. That it's terrible and horrible that they experience these things, but what they're doing is showing people how these systems work and what they went through, and it's it's therapy for them, and I think it gives people a voice, and um, that's what you've done just so well, and has like helped so many people, including myself. So you know with you and what you've done, um, can't thank you enough as always, and but it's so enlightening and because it, how do I say this? It's easily to be dismissed, I think, when it's like just you saying, speaking about something, right? But then you've got people that you don't even know saying things that parallel what your research is, and you're like, God, I'm sorry they went through that, but thank you for speaking on it because now I don't feel like I'm going crazy or have this false perception of the information. So um, here we are.
It's so validating. That was an unexpected side effect of this, is seeing how many puzzle pieces and how much overlap, because some of the stuff is so, I don't want to say crazy in a bad way. It's horrific. And I don't mean crazy as in it's actually crazy and not true, but just that it is true. And this stuff is so unimaginable for most people. Like, it's beyond what our imaginations can even comprehend.
Yeah,
That it is easy. Like you said, people tune into one testimony or they see one little part of a video of one person and they say, oh my gosh, that is so outside the realm of my belief system. I can't, there's no way that's true. But like you said, when you get what happens when two people say the same thing, or three or four, all of a sudden, and these people don't know each other, is it so crazy anymore if the story is validated over and over and over again, and these same people have the same locations, same abusers, same perpetrators, same programs and experiences whenever they're being abused, same type of system that is being, perpetuated on them, organization. It's like at some point it breaks the dam, and it helps somebody's mind be able to comprehend that, hey, this is beyond what I can imagine, but could it be true? How are so many people saying this? It's like you become, I saw this video once that was called, it's a little TED talk and it's called like starting a movement or something. And it talks about, it's actually just a little video. It's really cute. But it shows like a festival and there's all these people sitting on the grass. There's music playing. Everybody has like a little blanket. They're sitting and talking, like drinking a beer. And this one person gets up and is like dancing like crazy. Like he's all alone and everybody's looking at him like, what is this person doing? Like, you're standing up and dancing. And then, like 30 seconds later, another person gets up and starts dancing with him. And then a third
yeah,
person. And then pretty soon it's almost like a standing ovation. When you see everybody standing up around you, like you stand, because otherwise you're the odd man out if you're the one sitting while everybody else is standing. So then by the end of the video, and it's like 2-3 minutes, everybody's up on the lawn dancing because one person had the courage to go do it alone and have people be like, wait, what is he doing? And these stories are very much like that. Like, one person has the courage to get up and say it and say, look, I know this sounds crazy, but this is what happened to me. And then another person says, oh my gosh, me too. I don't have the same story, but this also happened to me. All of a sudden, you create a movement, you create something that nobody can deny. And so then the only people that don't believe it end up being the ones that look crazy instead of the ones that do, and that's like what we're all doing with each other. And that's why I love this community, because we understand that this isn't, it's not my mission. It's not just your mission. Like, it's a mission that's so important for our most vulnerable population, the children. And it's something that we can all put our egos aside and say, let's all work together and come together and pour all of our information together,
yeah,
see where it gets us, and see if we can, make a dent at protecting these, next generations and even current generations. Survivors that have escaped are still being targeted, like you were talking about, and are still suffering. But these stories really, really validate each other in that way, and they corroborate each other, and all of a sudden it changes the perception from the outside of people who are very new to it. And like you said, even if you're not new to it, just feeling more secure with trusting your intuition and saying, I knew it, I was questioning myself, but that person validated it. So it helps us like trust ourselves more too, whenever we see it validated.
yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, Em, is like, we have, and I've talked to Pam and Tony and yourself, and some of our other close friends. It's like, okay, we have all these we have our individual niches, I guess you would say. But what we're doing is we're aggregating this information not. I'd never want somebody to say, "Well, he's doing it for himself," because that was never my impetus. My daughter is my impetus. Helping other parents not go through these systems is my impetus. Um, Believe me, like for those of us who like sort of quote unquote survived the family court system, but you still don't get to see your child and have them, you know, had a very, very long time for me personally, but you're doing it to help people avoid these pitfalls, set up by the system. None of this has ever been for me. I could, I could have remained anonymous and faceless and not said anything. And what good would that have done anyone? Nothing. The information is more important than me. It became much bigger than me or any individual effort that I could put forward, very quickly. Like this is like you start reading about child support and you're like, my God, this is affecting just the child support aspect of all this. This is affecting generations previously and now and in the future if something's not done. So very quickly it became more important and much bigger than me or any kind of ego. And I think that's just one tremendous commonality we all have is like we're all selfless and we know it's bigger than us and we know that we're just a conduit, you know, being able to provide what we do for other people. And that's it. It's for other people, not for us, not for our own edification. It's for the children, it's for the disadvantaged people who don't have a voice. Um, you know, I'm blessed in the fact that, in more ways than I can count, but it's a blessing having a cell phone, that I can talk to you and we can do these interviews. Um, I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for everybody who's supported us, along the way and still supports us. And if you don't see that these things are bigger than you, then you probably shouldn't be in doing this. It, it's really cool knowing the people that we do, but I would think that they would agree with my thought is that what's even cooler is that we're providing information and help to people we may never meet, and we're saving people, saving kids in the process. And that for me, that's just the impetus, and it's just a beautiful thing to see it grow like it has. Especially just with just you and I, like we've watched each other grow, like that it's wonderful, and we're doing more for others.
It is amazing. And like I said, it's cool seeing even, just for me going back to our first podcast and seeing, and that was even like that long ago, like you've come so far with what you've dug into, like it sort of does snowball once you start getting into it, but you see like where a decade got you and now you're like, triple doubling. It's like the snowball just keeps going faster and faster. And the more information you get, the more you see that there is. And so your network expands, the information expands, the web gets bigger. And so you have more points sort of to choose from and to venture off into and to connect, and it's been really, really cool seeing that with you too, Jack, and just your open-mindedness to not staying stuck on information when presented with new information and like having that curious mind, being okay with, either having to change your story or add on to it, because that's important too, that like you said, we're truth centered, that it's not just about, this is the information, this is the only information, this is 100% fact, no matter what, even though I've been challenged by somebody or I've come across something that challenged this information that could potentially either mean it's wrong or just that there's more to it. And I love
Right,
that
right.
too, because it encourages other people, I think, to just be grounded and humble too, versus, having to know it all. Like, none of this is our information. Like, we're collecting it, trying to find out what happened in the past. Like, a lot of us weren't even here whenever some of this stuff began or was, you know, uh, whenever it started. So being able to go back in time, like, none of that information belongs to us. We're just simply, like you said, the conduits collecting it and trying to piece it together and figure out what our past was, what our present currently is, so we can make a better future. And I love that about you. And one thing I want you to talk on before it escapes my mind is the family dynamic and how the attack on families and men, and breaking up families, like how that cascades into feeding this whole system too.
You know, admittedly, I'm not the most devout Christian. I curse. I really try not to, but I curse. That I slip up. I'm not perfect. Um, but growing up, and even more now, like that I'm older, it's like I grew up reading the Bible. That the scripture. That's my foundation. If you believe in the Bible, you believe in scripture, you believe it's the word of God, and that Christ is our Lord and Savior and is the word made flesh. Okay. So we have an establishment of what's good and holy. So if you believe in what's good and holy, then you must believe in the opposite of that, or believe that there is an opposite of that, which is pure evil, which would be the devil himself, right? So if you study all these systems, study the military industrial complex, you study child support, welfare, foster care, it quickly becomes apparent, if you have that Christian worldview, that these systems are all designed to destroy the family dynamic, in which, um, I've heard, it's not the nuclear family in my estimation. It's the biblical structure of what the family should be, and I agree completely. Whereas the man is the head of the family, his wife. And let me be very, very careful with this. Whereas the wife is submissive to the man, but he should be a man worthy of being submitted to. He should be God-centered. He should uh, love his wife like Christ loves us. That's how I view that. If you're out here messing around and like doing dumb stuff, you, no woman's gonna submit to that. Like why would she? Because then, therefore, she's shorting herself. There's a very, very critical structure, I believe, very crucial structure for a man to be the head of the household. Um, what happened in what probably beginning in the 50s is when child support was really established. That was due to the world wars, right? Men were going off to war. Um, the women were staying at home, taking care of the children. Um, the men were out working, or then eventually it went to war. So child support was kind of established, basically established, as we're told, to provide a way for women to make do, to have an income so they can continue to take care of the family. So, well, that just went to hell in a handbasket real fast, when we see Title 4D and things like that coming out of the feminist movement. You know, I think it's pretty well established, that the feminist movement was a Trojan horse to help further dissolve the family. You know, believe me, I believe that women should be strong and independent. But done so within the family. And I think any man worth his salt would agree. Um, So these systems are designed to attack the family unit and tear it apart, um, which is, and they even tell you, like the child support manuals, foster care manuals, the states, judges, court officials, they don't get paid unless there is a separation. You know, those systems are designed to create and cause conflict, thereby pretty much giving more incentive for divorce, right? So if CPS is the mechanism through which women are losing their children, and it is, then child support is the mechanism through which men are being pulled away or forced out of a family. That's how I view that. So yeah, that's what we're looking at. You know, these demons that I don't see how anybody could call them anything other than demons. Want nothing more than the destruction of society. They want to take people away from a God-centered family unit. They, they do not want God in the equation. Now, I don't know how much more clearly it could be than when you get married. It's not holy matrimony anymore. It's marriage. Guess who's involved in marriage? The husband, the wife, and the state. It's a contract, you know. Um, no, I think marriage and holy matrimony, specifically holy matrimony, um, it's wonderful. You know, you got two loving people, both their focus is on God and taking care of each other, having a family. That's there's I don't think there's anything better than that. You know, you're celebrating God, you're celebrating Christ. You know, through that love. You know, fantastic. The problem is the state, these people, demons, systems don't care about that. They want to monetize everything. They want to place everything into commerce. You know, um, and I would really encourage people to just go back and study the Canaanites. You know, even if not from a biblical perspective, go look at their commerce system. You know, it's admiralty, maritime jurisdiction. Um, there's a lot to that, but if you can find um, called clerks praxis, um, it's such that's so important. It's such an important document book to understand. Um, but all those systems were derived from the Canaanites, and that's what the government has devolved into is nothing but commerce. They see us as chattel. Um, you know, when they monetize and securitize your birth certificate, you know, there's nothing else they won't. I mean, we know that anyway, but there's nothing they won't do. There's nothing they won't try to attach a monetary value to, and that includes children's lives. You know, clearly. Um, and I will argue with anybody. Like, child support is not about the child, nor is it support. It's about reimbursing or continuing to refill the state's coffers and providing a way for the foster care system to get a hold of children. That's I don't see how anybody could come to any other conclusion than that who studied this stuff. Um, so yeah, everything that we're looking at now, you know, Maximus is Maximus. They're a critical part of this, but this entire massive system is a they can't make you a part of the system, then they will get rid of you, so you're out of the system permanently through whatever means necessary. Um, it's 1984, but I don't think Orwell could have ever imagined anything like this.
I completely agree. I know it feels like we're in a weird dimensional time shift. Like time feels way different now, but just
Yeah,
it's almost like I mean, of course we know that MK Ultra is a sliding scale. Like they're obviously, deploying warfare on our minds. Like we know that, we see that, but you also see it not just in like the propaganda and the ways that they're brainwashing us through our TVs, through, repetition, through trauma, but you also see it in society where you can even just look at like a state, right? Or a country. Like first of all, they fracture the country so it's divided into two parties. Then they take those two parties and they fracture those parties into even
yeah,
smaller,
yeah.
race wars and economic wars and you name it, but it's interesting looking at if you picture the globe almost like a brain, they've compartmentalized everything. Countries are battling each other, religions, there's wars going on. It's really interesting how they've, really attacked everybody, and right down, like you said, to that family unit where they're like, hey, how can we get the most money out of these people? And even outside the courtroom, you look at how crazy, and I don't want to diss anybody. Like, I think pregnancy is beautiful. I think marriages, whatever it is that you want to do, but look at how commercialized they've made it. It's like a wedding isn't even, to me, it doesn't even feel like a lot of times it's about the two people anymore. It's about how much money can you spend to impress the guest? What's the best cake that you can have and the best venue and the most expensive dress, and all the ways that you can wow the guests. And it's sad, I meet brides who can't wait for that day to be over. And it's like, gosh, what if we turn this into to where that should be like the greatest day of somebody's life to like get to join hands in that holy matrimony, that sacred union with somebody and commit your life to that person. And women and men are like, I can't wait for this day to be over. Like, I'm sick of it. And it's like, oh my goodness, like, and all these parties that we're pressured to have a gender reveal party, a pregnancy party, a baby shower, an actual ceremony after the baby's born. And like I said, I don't diss anybody for that, but I notice it, and like my mom even made a comment on that before about, geez, like I can't believe your generation's like how different it was. When I got pregnant when I was young, I told my parents and that was it, and then I had my baby. I didn't
Yeah,
like
yeah.
making appointments. Like I didn't even know what gender I was having, and she's like, what is going on with all this? And that was when I started to think about it too, because really, like that's all I've known. Like, you know, all that stuff started pretty soon after I got out of high school and my friends started having kids. So that was sort of normalized for me to where I didn't really think about how it was for my mom or my grandma, but you look at that and then it's like they build you up, they make you spend all this money, like right in that beginning part, and then they slaughter the family unit, like you said, break them up, so they're already in debt from all the ways that they've, spent money to have a kid and to get married. And then they break you up, put you in court, and now you're paying, perpetual money, maybe forever, or at least until like these kids are grown up. Like now you're funding the state even more. And so it's like they're constantly looking at all these ways that they can like milk money out of us and commercialize us, and like leave us resourcefulness, leave us depending on them to like make those answers for us. And people don't realize that like, if you have a problem with the state being in your marriage, like maybe don't go through the state. If you don't want to go through family court, maybe settle things outside of court. Like we don't need to depend on the government to like, initiate a decision for us or to be that magic 8 ball of like, here's our problem, you give us the solution. Like we can take a
Yeah.
lot of that into our own hands, like just stop participating in it. You know what I mean? It is just interesting how these like traditions and like this dependency on our state and our government and our court systems, it's so reactionary for people. They don't, and granted, I know that these courts can do good. Like I'm not saying every single case that goes to court, like there are some times where I'm like, oh, that was a really fair judgment and like a fair outcome of whatever it was. Like sometimes the courts are fair, but for the most part, like they exist to capitalize on us, and especially our kids, because they know that that's something that parents would do anything for a kid, same thing for a pet. And so they'd even go broke for their children. And many of them do, through things like child support and paying for lawyers and paying for these courts. So it's like, I think the more that we can sort of see the bigger picture and like realize that the state doesn't have that power of us, that we can take matters into our own hands in a lot of ways and go back to before all this stuff was popularized and reactionary and say like, what did my grandma do? Like if my grandma was faced with wanting to divorce her husband or like trying to figure out where the kids went, like that wasn't really an option back then, that like, oh, we have to go to court, family court's going to solve it. Like a lot of families discussed
Right.
like didn't break up because they, instead of just giving up and like asking the court to give them the final answer, like they discussed it amongst each other and like worked it out, and like we've really lost that. We've lost that of like committing to each other. Instead, we don't feel secure unless the government puts a stamp on our marriage certificate, and then we're like, whew, now I'm married, like now it's official. And it's like, wait, like you don't feel secure with your partner, like you need the government to regulate that for you, and like that's what's going to solidify in your mind that you're committed to somebody, just the government, and like they can, use that against you. And again, like I'm not dissing anybody. Like I said, I love marriage, but there's a lot of people that complain about how the government controls them. And like we don't realize that we're sometimes willingly giving up that control, not realizing that, you know, we can be secure in ourselves sometimes and in our communication and our ability to problem solve with another person privately, and that we don't always need to just jump at the quickest bit to have the government officiate something for us. Or like I said, like, a magic 8 ball, like here's our problems, it's two sides, like you choose the outcome and we're gonna obey it. I think there's a lot of ways that we can start building those small communities again, just like how our grandparents and great grandparents did, and try to work more outside of that, and come together and create solutions with the people that we have the problem with. And again, I know that that's not always possible. There's some psychos that I've seen where like, there is no working out things between parents sometimes. There's one person that's just not going to happen. Like you need a mediator or an officiary or a lawyer, a judge, a jury. You need somebody there to sort of oversee it. I get that. And that's why we have courts. But more often than not, it's like it ruins that family dynamic even more going through the court, instead of making it a good situation for the kid in a sense where like both parents are sort of on the same page. Now it's like lopsided. The court's going to give everybody, one person maybe full custody, the other parent's left out. And it's like, wait a minute, like we were looking for a fair assessment, and something that would benefit the whole family. And that just, like you said, that's not their goal in court. It's not about what's best for your family, what's best for this child that's in the middle of this. Instead, it's like, oh, we can get a little bit of money here if we do this. We can get a little money here if we do that. We can get a lot of money if we do this, and that's what they're sole focus is. It's not emotional for them like it is for us. It's very cut, dry, black, white, about capitalizing, and turning humans into a commodity, turning children into something that they can racketeer and pyramid scheme their way to, filling their pocketbooks. So it's really fascinating that you talk about that, because I didn't really consider how breaking up that family unit also feeds the family court, even though I knew those two things separate. It's like, gosh, the deliberation in that, it's not just to like destroy feminine, what's even the word? Femininity, is that what it is? I don't feel like I'm saying that wrong. Femininity and masculinity, they're shattering that and like creating masculine women and like these weak feminized men. But now they're pushing more and more people, because divorce is so easy, because all of this stuff, they're creating conflict and people, fighting. So people just willingly hand over their power to these court systems. And more and more and more and more, like you hear about so many people going to court instead of like doing things how it used to be done. So you see how all this warfare, and like how you said, MK Ultra, it's infiltrated literally everything, all from,
Yeah.
These sub projects and these, hidden black ops, to what you see happening in the court system that's right in your little hometown. So it's really fascinating to look at it from those dynamics, Jack.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of great points, Em, and it's like, think about the older generations. It's like they didn't run down to the courthouse to register their marriage. They put it in the family Bible.
Yes,
Same thing for
yes.
same thing for the birth. But leave it to the. And I hate to use the blanket. Like I don't want to, but the damn attorneys. The bar members. Um, I've got a particularly nasty disposition towards attorneys, if everybody isn't aware, because of the involvement in my own case, involved with my daughter. But had I stayed in that situation, I don't think I would have seen what I have and learned what I have. Anyway, but yeah, they found a way to monetize and destroy everything. Um, and women don't realize it. It's like, okay, when you apply for child support, now I'm not saying, the original intent of child support was good, but became incredibly perverted, right? I mean, just nothing like it was designed to initially. Um, do single mothers need help? Yeah, yeah. But what single mothers who apply for child support don't realize is that when you sign up for child support, you're relinquishing a certain percentage of your parental rights because the state is now responsible for helping take care of the child, which gives them standing in a court. They can now more or less tell you what you're going to do with your child because you're getting benefits, quote unquote, from the state. Um, I just wish more people were aware of that. There's a lot more to it, of course, because then you get involved with like the Hague Treaty Convention on Child Support, the UIFSA, and some of the other areas. And family court is just this is massive, massive industry. Um, it has been for a very long time, but family court would be to me is an avenue for the illegal child trafficking, right through CPS. Where the kids just freaking disappear. Um, God forbid, and only God knows what happens to those children. I mean, we know a lot of what happens, and I don't want to repeat it, but if you know, you know. But these systems are all designed for that. They're designed to one dissolve the family, separate the children, monetize everything from the man, the woman, to Johnny and Susie. Everybody becomes monetized. Outside of that, it's just the worst things that you can't imagine. Through um, and you have to always keep in the back of your mind all of these systems are based on the occult. If you want to call it the occult, that's fine. I'll call it like it's outright Satanism, right? It's Luciferianism, worship. It's worship of the devil. That is the absolute bare bones of these systems. That's what it goes back to. It goes back to the other deities like Baal, Moloch. This is all in scripture. There's nothing new under the sun, and that's scripture also. But when you take a society away from the Bible, they're not going to realize that that's in the Bible, or the systems they're seeing are derived from this stuff. Like some of these weapons and some of these other technologies they use, have used and still use them, like the MK experiments. Um, a lot of that stuff is like religious practice, quote unquote religious practice. Or they want to call it the religion. That, of course, that's the inverse of what everything we know is. But it's like when we were reading stuff about Angie's case, right? And we were looking at particular wounds on how they happen and where they happen, and it's right. You realize pretty quickly that it's like, okay, this person was killed this way, because of this ritual, and then you see those rituals being amplified through the technology, right? So it's that people have become through these systems become unaware of what they're doing, and I think it's essential for people like us to show people what's happening. That's why we have to stick together and share what information we have and get it out there because it's bigger than us. It always has been, you know. Um, yeah, I'm of the same thought, and like um, marriage and holy matrimony and a family. I don't think there's anything better, but they don't want that. you know,
Uh,
um, I mean, I fully believe that courts in certain situations have their place, in extreme circumstances. But otherwise, like you said, live in the private, keep the government out of your business. Like it is, but I think it's people have systematically, knowingly and unknowingly relinquished their God-given rights, and statism is just deadly. It is so dangerous, and I can't think of. There's nothing in me that says more government is better. Like why would you think that?
right. Yeah. It's just fascinating how people like, I don't know, marriage is something that now that I know so much about what I do, I never used to look at it this way, but it's just odd to me now that that's what makes somebody feel secure, as if the government gives them a piece of paper that puts them like in a third party contract. It's almost like having this other person in your relationship that's like officiating it for you and like making your vows real, and it's like, geez, like
Yeah,
we need that to like feel uh in union with somebody. We can't just be in union with the person in front of us. Like the government has to like be that third party in our in our relationship. Like I said, I don't diss anybody. Like it's so special, like weddings, and I totally get it. Like I always thought of it as something very sacred, and that was my vision of marriage too, up until very recently, where now I'm just like, gosh, that sounds pretty awful that they're writing a contract and basically I don't have any say in my marriage unless they give me a piece of paper that says that it's official from them, that I can't just make it official, right? It's just kind of weird.
yeah. It's the complete opposite of what it was. Like
Yeah.
it's like I'm sure it's been said, but it's like, well, did you get the fancy gold leaf, stamp of seal of approval? Like now we're married, yay! Like
Yeah.
you know, but I've got some friends on Facebook, and that's been a point of contention for a long time. Is the birth certificate? It's like how do you escape that system? Like, it's purely enslavement through the Social Security and birth certificate system. And like people have been providing some really great information about how to create your own documents, and ways to basically ways to create your own documents, record them, and not have to get like the state's not involved. You record the birth in the family Bible, you create your documents, and but they've also designed it where it's like the state and whatever entity you want to call it, the government, where if you're not a part of that system, guess what? You don't receive any benefits. You can't get your Social Security because you've not worked and blah blah blah. So it's, it's perversion of what God created. It's
Yes.
complete perversion. Um, but it's essential to understanding all these little components that make up the big picture that where we're at. I just hope I can help people see that stuff, and I think we all share that too. We all want to help show people these things. Hey, it exists. It's real. This is not conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, here we are with
Absolutely.
all this.
You're so right. When I moved to Missouri um in the last couple years and I had to go register my car and like switch my ID over, I couldn't believe the documentation that I needed just to be able to drive my vehicle in this state. I had to get all these different, like I had to bring so many different ways to prove that I'm me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like if you didn't have like a birth certificate or social security number, like they enslave you to not even be able to legally like drive a vehicle. It's just really weird to me. It's so bizarre. Like just all the different, and they have those new driver's licenses now that they need all these different documentation. I forget what, something ID, the
The real ID.
real ID, yeah. You need to
Yeah,
bring all
yeah.
this documentation to get that. And that's going to be required everywhere if it's not already. But even that, it's gotten so out of hand with what happened to me just being me and like being able to have maybe one identification or something. Now you have to like bring proof of your rent. You have to bring this, you have to bring that, car insurance, emissions. Like it's really wild. Just something like registering your vehicle goes crazy with the documentation that they require.
I think about the ID cards, and something in me says that, like something like that back, centuries ago would you probably would have been ridiculed for having something like that. It'd been like, oh, so I see you created this for yourself, by yourself. It's like, oh, but it's okay. I got the state to do it for me, so you can trust that. Oh, and yeah, the whole registering your car, like that's under like transportation code and commerce. So it's like they've created whole systems of deceptive language. Um, there's, from what we know, like those are spells, like those that so twisted. Oh my God. But you got to be aware of it before you can do anything. And I think that's what what we're all pushing for is just help people become aware of it first, and then you can find avenues of remedy or trying to remedy whatever the situation is, whatever it may be. Either in family courts or foster care. But we got to know this stuff is there, and got to help people remove that veil. You got to pierce that veil, and um, for people like me, I'm like regardless of what you think of Alex Jones, his rants are pretty dang funny. When he's like, and I kind of
That was a good
get
impression.
like I get why like some of the really OG researchers and truthers, quote unquote truthers, they used to being just kind of irritated all the time. I understand why. It's like because you have some people who really want to learn, and they'll reach out, but then you have some people who just fine with the way things are, and it's like, how can you be like that when you see through that stuff? um, but I remember watching like some of Bill Cooper's stuff. I'm like, when I first saw him, I was like, man, that guy's an ass. Like he is a horse's ass. And then I was like, now I know why. You know, so but you can't allow yourself to be black pilled and jaded and think that everything's just terrible all the time because it's not. Um, so count your blessings, but um, count your blessings, pray and thank God, but be aware. And if you're not, and you want to be, ask somebody. Like, we're all here willing to do that, and hoping we can help. So, Yeah, yeah. That's um yeah, I'm just revisiting the past, I guess you would say, and like trying to play catch up and see maybe where we're headed. I think, if nobody's really studied the Smart City Initiative through the UN and WEF and all that, you really should be studying that. Those systems are like a culmination of a lot of things that Maximus has been part of for the past 48 years. Not just them, but DARPA and some of those other intel groups and the big tech guys and Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is where I'm near, is pretty much ground zero for the Smart City Initiative. Before Racine, Wisconsin, or um, you know, it was Chattanooga, and I think it was either San Jose or San Diego. We were the two cities chosen in the United States for the Smart City Initiative. Chattanooga has exponentially increased um, everything that they're doing. They're doing it through the Department of Energy, through Oak Ridge National Lab, which is where the Manhattan Project got its feet. Um, a lot of the technology is coming from Oak Ridge National Lab, and we're the beta testing site for it all. So when we talk about human rights being on lockdown through all these hidden contracts and bonds, and certificates and registrations, the smart city is that, but to the nth degree. So I'm really trying to put together some solid information for everybody about that stuff. I mean, I think a lot of people are aware of it, but just not to the degree of where we're at in Chattanooga. I mean, kind of a for the most part a quaint mid South town, southern Tennessee, southeast Tennessee, but Tennessee in general is just it's important on a global scale, and um, myself and other like-minded people in Tennessee are really trying to show people that. But outside of Tennessee and with everybody we know, I know we're all trying to show everybody all these things that we're aware of and increasing our knowledge in those areas. But it's a group effort. They have their networks, we have ours, and I think it's essential that we build our networks and do it for the children, for the future generations, because without the children, we have no future generations.
Amen to that. Yes. And you're right. Like, we do need to get better with like also studying geographical locations, and learning even just around us. It's really good to be aware of what your state is perpetuating and like what's happening under the veil. Every state has sort of their cachet in a sense of what they're doing, and obviously a lot of the stuff cross over state to state, but yeah, it's like it's very good to be aware of these big cities that they try to push us into. That was one reason why I was so happy to get all out of Las Vegas, because I was like, nothing good is going to happen here, and I knew I had to leave, and I'm so grateful that I did. I feel so much better, like this huge weight lifted off my shoulder, but just kind of learning about the the geographical locations and just what's happening, all of that, and what they're planning for the future. Like that really is where we need to be, looking next. After we're learning the past, we need to be like, how do we stop this from happening in the future? So as your research develops, let's do maybe another podcast sometime on the smart cities whenever you get some stuff that we can talk about more. Because that would be really fascinating too for people to learn more about, more than what they think that they know. Because a lot of people know about it, but they're not really worried about it. And I think they should be. So maybe we could do an episode on that aspect of it and sort of tackle how Tennessee's the ground zero for that, and then, talk about how that's going to be duplicated not just in our country, but obviously they want that for everybody. So that would be a really cool episode to do with you.
Yeah, heck yeah, man. Because it's like, okay, it occurred to me during like all of this research and all these other areas. I'm like, you're collecting biometrics, that's it's biosurveillance and biometrics data collections and systems they're working on. And then I started seeing stuff come online, and it was like, that's why this is here. That's why they developed this, and everything's been very, very. I mean, just calculated to agree. I could never fathom. Personally, I'm like, wow. Um, but yeah, I would love to do that because people are like, oh, I just use my thumbprint to open my phone or my face. I'm like, you, you we can delve into that later, so I don't go off on a rant.
Yeah, let's do it. That would be a really fascinating episode. Let's definitely do that. Was
Heck
there
yeah.
anything else on these topics today that you wanted to cover? Or did we get through?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot.
We did.
Kind of like a 40K view, so to speak. But I could tell everybody a lot more, but they'd be bored to death. But um, yeah, just be aware of this stuff, y'all, and please follow myself and Ann, and
Tell people where can they find you?
you can find me at either on like I've got two channels on Telegram, one of which I share with Tony Triano. There's Maximus Disclosure. Um, that's Tony and I's channel, the 2.0. And I've got Facebook, but literally I logged in yesterday and they had removed 10 of my posts. Yeah. Um, so Facebook, I kind of use more of like a storage site anymore for, for things, I like, I've got a lot of friends that are still on Facebook that, are involved in like commercial law and banking law and things like that. So that's a really great resource, but that's primarily what I use Facebook for anymore, other than to like look at silly memes or storage or whatnot. I'm not saying it shouldn't be utilized because it can be, but me personally, they're killing my account left and right every day. But I'm usually on Twitter. Um, so it's Maximus Disclosure or at Nuka Jack. Um, so that's where I've been posting mostly. A lot of the deeper dives I post on Telegram just because of I'm not paying for a blue check mark. And there's and at least with Telegram right now, it's kind of have like a unlimited character count, so to speak. You can post some really deep research. Um, but Telegram and Twitter are primarily where you can reach me. But yeah, um, I would encourage everybody to also follow my friend Dana. You know, Tony Triano. Um, yeah, Dana's work is really great, and she touches on a lot of areas that I wasn't even aware of. And for a while now, we've been seeing overlap in our research, either different organizations or people. Um, Dana's a sweetheart, just tremendous heart. Just a great person in general. Um, Mainly intelligent. So follow her. I guarantee you'll learn something. And then Tony Triano is she and Pamela Olson are just I've known them for for a long time. And Tony's work with exposing CPS and foster care, same with Pamela Olson, just fantastic, just fantastic. You know, I consider us all more like family than even close friends or whatever we want to live with. I'd say we're all family. You know, so much love and respect for these people. Can't speak enough on them. You know, Gino, Insight, and then I try to shout out everybody I can on Twitter. You know, like because you know I've been blessed with so many people helping me, showing me things. But yeah, just follow the people I do on Twitter, including you, and of course, you know, Dana's got a good. She's got a strong following on YouTube now, which is good to see. You know, her work deserves it. Pamela, Tony, and we're working on some stuff. You know, and I want to try to. I'll have to get with you sometime soon too, because like I want to design merch for us all. You know, try to get some stuff going, but we're trying to do things. Is what I'm trying to say, people. You know, here again, it's not about us. It's about helping other people. Is why we do this. We're just the conduit, you know. I'm thankful.
Well, we're thankful for you, Jack. You're always filled with new and groundbreaking information, and you've discovered over the past decade plus is nothing short of phenomenal. And it's put together a lot of puzzle pieces for a lot of people who never would have even thought to go down the rabbit hole that you did, you know? So thank you for all your research and for your courage to share. You know, it's not easy either being one of the first to share about something so nefarious, you know, and then also pairing it with topics that a lot of people don't want to talk about, like child abuse and, you know, MK Ultra. You know, it can be really difficult being in the line of fire for that. And you're not a survivor, you know, so you willingly put a target on your back when you don't have to, you know. And I know that you're fighting for your daughter, you're fighting for yourself. You know, you're a survivor in your own right with what you've gone through and what you continue to go through and, you know, advocate for. But you could easily do that behind the scenes. You don't have to come out, you know, it doesn't benefit you necessarily to come out and do this, but in the long run, you know, it benefits the community and it benefits the children. So I really appreciate all the work that you do, Jack. And I'm gonna have all of Jack's links below. I'll link the article that we went over today. So if you're listening on like Spotify or iTunes, and didn't really get to see or follow along, or if you're on your phone and the writing was small, it's a really good article. We read just a little part of it. So I'll link that below so you guys can go actually check it out, dive in, and learn about all these connections in one spot. So I'll link that. I'm gonna link Jack's Telegram pages. Please go follow him on Telegram. He's an admin on my channel too, but he shares a lot on his channel, and sometimes that crosses over and he'll post some stuff into my channel, but there's so much more on his. So if you're following me already, go follow Jack's channels. If you are not following either, please go follow both of Jack's channels. He puts out some really amazing information, and he always plugs the people that he just mentioned. So all the people that he mentioned are pretty easy to find through him. And I do recommend that you guys go follow them also because they are phenomenal. So I'm gonna have that all below, you guys. I'll have all my links in the show notes too, so you guys can follow me. I always say, you know, even if you only use one platform primarily, say you're just on Twitter or Facebook, sign up on other accounts and just follow us on other accounts, because we never know like where we're going to be today and where we might not be tomorrow. You know, when you get stuff deleted off Facebook 100 times, eventually they take you off Facebook. So if that's your only way of keeping in touch with somebody and they're on other platforms, you're never going to know if they disappear off that one. And if you do notice, you're not going to know where to find them on, you know, elsewhere. So please go, you know, do us a favor, do Jack a favor, do me a favor, and go follow Jack on multiple platforms, and support him. You know, it's always good to have eyes on whistleblowers too, and to let the enemy know that we see these people, you know, that they're not just out there shouting into an empty abyss or, you know, on a brick wall, that we have eyes on them, that we hear them, that we're protecting them, you know, and that if anybody tries any funny business, like, you're not going to get away with it. So please go support, follow Jack. He's a wealth of knowledge. Reach out to him, ask him questions, ask him for documents. He's so accessible and very, very communicative. Very willing to share, very, very willing to listen. If you guys have other information that corroborates that you want to share with him, go share. You know, be a puzzle piece, you know, and take any puzzle pieces from this and cite his work if you share it. So you guys, we couldn't do this without you. I'm so grateful for all of you. Thank you for supporting Jack, for every guest. Thank you for supporting this podcast, for supporting me. It's an honor to get to do this with all of you guys, and I couldn't do it without you. So you guys, we will see you next time. God bless you and thank you.